So welcome everyone to the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. This is a free webinar all about Amanita Muscaria mushroom. And while Amanita Muscaria just might be the most iconic mushroom, it's also the most misunderstood. Tonight, we're going to be learning the truth about this legal entheogen and its healing potential. And this is an introductory webinar to our upcoming program, Mushroom Magic with Amanita Muscaria. My name is Danielle Negrin. I'm the Executive Director of San Francisco Psychedelic Society, and I'm here with my co-host, Emily Ruth, the social media sorceress. And we are absolutely honored today to have you be a part of our program. Just a little bit about the Society. We are a nonprofit organization that is an evolutionary healing community that's empowering global psychedelic culture through accessible education, integration, and connection. And we emphasize honoring Indigenous lineages, advocating for addiction recovery and mental health, and the destigmatization of all drugs. So please check us out at the psychedelicsocietysf.org. And I first want to honor the land that I'm on. I'm on Ohlone land, and I welcome you to honor the Indigenous land that you're currently on. So without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome our host and teacher and guide of this evening. Amanita Dreamer is a former high school science teacher who brought her background to solving her problem of panic attacks and anxiety when she was coming off anti-anxiety medication, specifically benzodiazepines, and experiencing horrible side effects. And when she found the Amanita Muscaria mushroom and the bad information on the internet, she was determined to help others by creating a channel to help teach correct information and create a safe space for a community of others that have lost their tribe. And Amanita is a dear friend. She's just an incredible human, and I'm so grateful that she has taken the opportunity to educate all of us about this sacred mushroom. So tonight we're going to learn the truth about this potent entheogen, and this is an introductory webinar to our upcoming 3-week course, Mushroom Magic with Amanita Muscaria, which we'll learn a little bit about later. And thank you all so much for joining us from all around the world. We're so grateful to have you here and part of this community, and thank you so much for your interest in this sacred mushroom. So welcome, Dreamer.
Thank you for the introduction. And quickly, I want to say thank you so much for doing this. Y'all worked really hard on it, and I'm really grateful. And then I want to say to all of you who are here that it is no small thing that you are giving up time on your Friday night to honor me with your presence. And I want to tell you that I am extremely grateful. This is a passion. It's something that I live to do. And the fact that you would be here with me tonight, I'm awestruck by it. And thank you. So what I wanted to do is spread the word about this because I want to end the suffering that I know is happening, especially now in the world. And this is my one small little part that I can play in it. And it floored me that once I knew what I was having was panic and anxiety, that there was nothing natural to help me. And the few things that there were really couldn't touch it. I mean, just herbs, like chamomile and kava and stuff like that. They just didn't touch the anxiety. And it seemed like even if it did, it only took one nightmare or one, difficult event at work, and I would just break through it. And I just kept cycling through anything that anybody would tell me would help with panic or anxiety. And when you consider our fight or flight response, how extremely important it is to our survival, that certainly with all the medications that are out there that are natural for just about everything that can hurt or plague us, that there would be something for something this important, for a system this important. And I really had the hardest time just being in disbelief that there wasn't anything for it when it seemed like there were so many things for anything else, especially mental health wise. And when I found St. John's wort, I thought, well, maybe it will work, for panic and anxiety. And it just made the anxiety worse, just like SSRIs did. So I was truly I had a feeling I was missing something, but I'm smart. I finally had internet, and even with the onset of the internet and everything, I still couldn't find it. And I never stopped looking and asking. And I went to hypnotherapy and EFT and EMDR and 8 years of therapy, and any book that I could read, anything that I could use, any tool, I have tried it. And I've tried diets, and I've tried detoxes, and I've tried teas, and I've gone to every guru and every retreat and yoga and meditation. If it was possible to do it, I tried it, because I just lived in a constant state of anxiety and panic and anxiety and panic. And I finally got to a point, well, I was giving up, and I was considering getting on medication. And I heard they were pretty rough when Hurricane Katrina hit and I was on the coast. And I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but it was rough, and I wound up having to relocate. And so we moved to Georgia, and then I had to, because of the games that the insurance companies played, I had to file bankruptcy. And from there, it just went downhill. The living conditions that I had to be in with children and animals and the small space that we could afford, that caused stress related issues. My panic just shot through the roof, until finally I was in the corner in my room, wide awake for 3 days straight, just shaking. And I knew I couldn't live like that anymore. I was completely non-functional at that point, and not even eating, not even sleeping. And I actually had a doctor tell me that a panic attack never lasts more than 20 minutes. And I was on probably a 5-day panic attack at that point. So I knew I had to do something, and I got on benzodiazepines. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I will talk about things that I see are happening, that I can prove, or that are happening to me. And I have seen through my life now that I am completely on natural medicines, and I'm not on anything anymore made by pharmaceutical companies. And I'm not going to get into theories about all of that. And you won't ever see me vilify the medical community in one big swipe, because there's an important role that they play in our health and in society when we need them. And I'm glad that benzodiazepines were there for me. If anyone was an emergent and desperate case, it was me. And the only other alternative would have been to put me in a medically induced coma, because it was just railroading out of control. And my life was in danger at that point. So I was grateful for the benzodiazepines, but I was on Klonopin, and I was on the highest dose that you could be put on for good reason. And it turned everything off, and I was grateful for the relief. But as some of you may know, that is a monster that can turn around and start eating you. And so I was like 5 years, I had learned to cope, which you can do. You can learn to cope with the level of sedation and confusion, I guess, that you start to live in on those kinds of drugs, especially on doses that high. But it got to a point where I couldn't live without notes. Just my whole life was notes, notes, notes everywhere, and getting things wrong and missing things, and just joking and laughing about it and thinking, oh, this happens to everybody. But knowing, like, it was bad when I would have to make sure, like, give my phone to someone so that after I took my medicine at night, I couldn't get on the internet, because I would do really stupid shit and live to regret it. And sometimes wind up, getting back on Facebook, and I'd been thrown out of groups, and I never knew what I did. And I'm pretty sure it was probably awful. And benzos, they start to mess with your brain's ability to communicate to both sides of the brain, and logic and reasoning and all that. And I really started to feel like I was having some permanent damage. Like I was really getting scared that I may never be normal again. And it was about that time that studies started coming out saying that it was causing early onset dementia. And one of the things that is important for me, that I've always been able to use to cope with the world, is my intelligence. And I was not anymore. And my children were having to take care of me. and I was having to get groceries delivered, and they were having to clean up messes and turn the stove off. Like, I was getting to a point where I was probably going to need to hire help to take care of me. And I knew I couldn't live like that anymore. And so I wanted to come off those. I felt like I had found a decent place in my life and that I had gotten my life stable. And I felt like I had a handle on everything. But as soon as I started dropping, if any of you have ever had to come off of benzodiazepines, you know it's a hell that's hard to describe, because when you just say the words about what's happening, it's hard to truly express the hell that's happening in your head and in your body. It's like a lightning storm. And the pain, I didn't know was a thing, but that's a thing, because your nerves have been muted for so long that when they all come back online, all they can register is pain. And so instead of firing, where they're supposed to, like a small itch or touch, and then pain, if that's what you feel, or pressure, they just shoot all the way to the top and cause muscle spasms, not just the kind like a spasm in your foot, but an intense kind that you can't do anything except scream. And I learned to live in that kind of pain where I wanted to scream, but I still had a life. And I learned to just shut that down and try to keep living my life. And I couldn't sleep, and restless legs and headaches, migraines, jerks and twitches, and these electrical shocks that I was getting all the time. And then there's the constant panic and anxiety returned, even with just a 10% drop in the medication. It was a living hell. It was a nightmare. So I quickly went right back up. And then that was shocking. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm really in for something here. This isn't going to be easy. I did research. I found the Ashton method. I found a group there of people that understood what I was going through, and that all we could really do is suffer through it. I mean, that's truly all anyone had. And we're talking thousands of people in these forums, and all they could say is, all you can really do is suffer through it and keep coming here and talking to us about it. And if you have to go back up, it's okay. We understand, we're all just, we've never had to do this before. And the doctors will tell you that you can get off of it in 2 weeks. And I already knew that I couldn't do that. And to me, that should be negligence. That should be malpractice. But it isn't, because that's what the literature says. But the literature will also tell you that the studies that were done on benzodiazepines were only done for short-term use, 6 weeks. And I had been on it for 5 years, and that's how it's prescribed. So that began my journey. I was able to get down to half my dose before I was back in the corner like I was when I first got on them, and unable to function. So I had to go back up on them again. And I would cycle back around like this over and over for 5 years, and hating myself and wondering what was wrong with me, that I couldn't do this. And I was watching other people get off of them successfully. And I thought I must be broken somehow, that I can't do this. I know now that it's not me, that millions of people are going through this. So after 5 years, I had started drinking, because the desperation, isolation, and the hopelessness of being permanently brain damaged, possibly, and now permanently with panic and anxiety, and that I would either stay on this medication and my life is basically over, or I would come off this medication and my life would be basically nothing but pain and hell. And I decided I would have to drink, and drinking would actually start to turn it down. Well, that's dangerous when you start drinking with benzodiazepines. And then I started throwing painkillers in there, because then the alcohol would quit working. And I thought, well, if it kills me, cool. It did me a favor, but at this point, I can't live like this anyway. And I look back on what I was taking. I was taking dangerous amounts of drugs that are not supposed to be taken together. I'm 5'1", I weigh 120 pounds. I don't know why I didn't die, but I would wake up every morning and go, oh God, and be so mad that I woke up. And I finally thought, well, I'll try one more time. So what I decided to do was put myself on my balcony out back on my deck. I sent my children to their father. I turned the world off, and I sat on my back deck and thought, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to deal with what happens when I get off of everything. So I went through the alcohol withdrawals and would wake up somewhere in my house, passed out, and, trying to come off of that, seizures, all of it coming off alcohol. And then I started the coming off of the benzos, and I did pretty well with it. I got off of it I got down to about 10% of my dose. And I spent 9 months alone. I didn't talk to anybody. And I went into myself and back out the other side, and in something that I don't know how to describe what it was that I did, but 9 months of not talking to anybody. And when I came out of it, I was in so much pain and so miserable, glad that I was on so little benzodiazepine, but had decided that there was nothing left to live for, that I was a burden to my children, that I was not a drug addict my whole life. Benzos made me a drug addict and an alcoholic, if that's what you want to call it. And that I am a person now who must live on high amounts of debilitating drugs to cope, or I have to live in constant pain and panic, and I can't do it anymore. So I planned my death. I did all my research. I got an attorney. I made my will. I planned out how I was going to do it to make sure that nobody would find me that's not qualified to find me. And I said, that's it. I'm done. And I felt like I was doing the world a favor. And I wanted to go to the woods to say goodbye to the earth. So I walked some woods that are not far from my house. And almost immediately when I got into the woods, there was this bright red mushroom. I had never seen anything like that in my life. And I picked it. And I came home because it didn't seem real. It seemed surreal and magical. And that's when I learned about Amanita Muscaria, and it is a GABA agonist. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So why don't I know about it? Deadly, it'll kill you. It's deadly, it'll kill you. I'm like, then how do they know it's a GABA agonist? So the more research I did, the more I learned that there was so much conflicting information, and all these people are tripping on it. People are calling it an amazing gift. All these indigenous people have been using it for thousands of years. I'm like, wait a minute. Now we know what you do with things that kill you. We talk about it and we say it'll kill you. We don't talk about how we've used it for thousands of years and glorify it. So I knew something wasn't right about that. And I didn't feel hopeful because everything I've ever tried failed. But I thought, I should at least give this a try. I didn't know what I was doing. I found more. I went out looking and I found more. I learned about hot dosing, and that one mushroom can have 100 times the actives as another one of the same size. So I didn't want to hot dose. So I put a bunch of them together in a pot and made a tea out of it. And I thought, well, if it kills me, it did me a favor. If it helps me, I learned something, or I just wake up like I am right now. And I took too much. I thought I was being careful, and I wound up tripping on it. And I described that trip in a video on my website. It was fun. It was terrifying. But most importantly, it was a break from the panic and anxiety. And I smiled and I laughed probably for the first time in years. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt like I was being born. And I felt like as I sat up, I was walking through something, and something was getting pushed away and out of me. And when I finished standing, I felt like it fell. And I realized for the first time in my life, I had no panic and no anxiety. And I never knew that I didn't know what that was like, because I had always had it. And I just fell to the floor and cried. I mean, sobbing, heaving, crying, because I didn't know life could feel like that. I didn't know what it felt like to not have anxiety, and that this could be normal. And I was scared to believe it, but I had a joy that I've never felt, and I don't know how to describe, but I've since heard other people describe it. Because of who I am and what I do, I get to hear that. And I started dosing it in smaller amounts. I never took another benzodiazepine or any of the other many drugs that I was on. I haven't drank alcohol since, never had a painkiller. I haven't had anything. I haven't wanted it. And I only have anxiety now that's warranted when I'm going through something especially difficult, and the anxiety is there to talk to me, and I know how to listen, and I know how to treat it if it's getting a little out of control. And I was angry that this was there all along. And for whatever reason, nobody anywhere told me about it, and nobody's telling anyone else about it. And when I tried to tell friends about it, I got that look like, oh God, she's into drugs, she's tripping on mushrooms and whatever. And, that's fair because I had been not a really normal person for a long time. So it made me sad that I watch people that I love and care about still struggle with panic and anxiety. And they've written me off as that mushroom nut. They think that this mushroom is psilocybin. I try to tell them it's not. And then they look online and they go, oh, that's dangerous. Like they think I'm sketchy and weird. And so I didn't want to do too much publicly, but I kind of at some point felt like it's not right that I'm enjoying this, that I sit on this information when I know so many people are hurting and they need to know. So all I did is I wanted to correct some really bad information about how you prepare it so people didn't make themselves sick. So I made this really crude, simple video and I wanted to upload it. And I thought, well, I can't use my real name. I don't want people to find me. So I thought, well, it is the Amanita and it has given me my dreams back through my dreams. So I am dreaming of a different future. I am Amanita Dreamer. And the minute I said it, like I felt this bolt of energy that I've never felt before. And I felt my whole life suddenly blow up out in front of me. And I got a glimpse of it and it scared me to death. But I thought anything in service to a mushroom that saved my life, I will upload this video. So I uploaded it and then I went on with my life and I forgot about it. And I came back 3 weeks later and I had over 600 subs and so many comments and questions. I was like, oh my God, where do I begin? And then I just started making videos and answering questions as fast as I could. And now I'm here. So I want to know why you're here, because now I know it's not just for panic and anxiety. This is probably the most prolific and amazing medicine on the planet. It does so many things well that no wonder it is so revered, that it is in art and lore and history and every indigenous culture on the planet because of the wide range of medicines that it is. And science is finally picking up on this. Some of it is because of me and some of the experimentation that I've done on myself, questions I've raised, and I've put it out there. And I'm happy to say some of the scientific community is listening. And I'm saying, look, I think there's potential for this. And I try things on camera. I experiment on camera. And I make theories and I support and defend my theories based on the science. And I fully believe we are going to see a day 20, 30 years from now where we know as much about this mushroom as we know about cannabis. And we will understand all of the things that it can do, how the two sides of the mushroom work. But we are only right now in the very beginning of it, where we were with cannabis back in the 70s, the very basic of research on it. But I have high hopes for what will become common knowledge, and that people will use this mushroom first before going to truly damaging, powerful medications. And I believe it is an adaptogen. I believe it is a balancer, that it can balance your fight and flight systems. I believe it heals the brain and the neurons in the brain the same way the other mushrooms do. I believe that it boosts immunity. I believe it can help with some of the issues with neurodivergence, especially the ADD people, with focus and attention and awakeness and alertness. I believe that it will help with suicidal ideation because it works on your key energy, CHI energy, your sense of self, your sense of ownership on the planet. It gives you motive and motivation. It makes you remember why you were here. It makes you excited again about the things that you thought about and wanted to do. It makes you excited about the small things and the important things. It makes you remember your past and where we come from and the importance of fire and ceremony and networking and community and people. It does so much that we don't even know we're lacking or missing. And I look forward to a day where I'm not necessary anymore, and where everything that is out there because people took what I did and they built on it. They shared, they spoke, they talked. And that in the future, when I'm long gone, no one will even know my name, but they will know what Amanita Muscaria is. And it will be used everywhere again, and it will reclaim its place with the humans on the planet. That's all I have to say about that.
Dreamer, thank you so much for everything that you've been through, for your strength, your vulnerability, and for deeply sharing your story with us and how you alchemized all of your suffering into such empowerment. And so grateful to walk this path with you as a fellow benzo recovery warrior.
Well, let's not forget, you can also trip on it. And I will never be upset about that because I do it too. And it has its own spiritual place. And in that workshop that we're talking about that's coming up, we get into detail about that, about all the entities. And I'm very science-based. So for me to start talking about spirits and entities, like, it's pretty powerful. And I never would have believed it if I hadn't experienced it myself.
Exactly. It takes that life experience to really foster that belief. And
those entities are real. They are real.
So as we are on the topic of our upcoming course together, do you want to just talk a little bit about the course that we're launching on July 12th and what you're going to be covering in the different weeks?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is break it up because there's so much to cover. And I know a lot of the questions that people ask, so we wanted to build in time for questions. So what we'll do is 3 Mondays will be class time. And then their following Friday, we'll have a tea sort of get together to talk about that, so we can talk about questions and things that aren't clear or whatever. Because this is the ceremony mushroom. Our ancestors have ceremonied with this mushroom around fires and around tea and using it as medicine. So it was important to me that we have tea to talk about it. So we'll have class on Monday, and then on Friday we'll have a tea ceremony and talk and answer questions. And we'll do that 3 weeks in a row starting, what do we decide? Let's see, July 12th. So we'll go July 12th, and then the last tea will be on July 30th.
Yeah,
if anybody's interested in it. But we'll cover everything, all of the different ways that you can use it. So what I wanted to cover is where it grows, because you can harvest it yourself. And we can talk about where you can buy it and the different ways that you can use it. But you can also harvest it, but it doesn't fruit until the fall. So in the Southern Hemisphere, they just had their fruiting and it's over. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, ours is coming up in the fall. And then the lore about it and historical use, because that's giving us directions of how to use it today. Even though I'm very science-based, there's something about indigenous people's use of it. They've been honing this in now for thousands of years. So even if the science doesn't match up when I do the experiments, they're right. So it's important to talk about how they use it. And then we'll talk about the actives in it and how to prepare it, all the different ways that you can prepare it, all the different ways that you can use it, and what each of those different ways do for you, because they're all very different. And I know that you're used to that with other entheogens and other natural drugs, but this one, probably more than any others, give you completely different results based on either how you prepared it or how you get it into your body. And we'll talk about that. And then microdosing and my protocol, the benefits of it, potential benefits of it, my working theories about things that we haven't discovered about it yet, and things that I believe it will be used for in the future, things we still don't know about it yet, and then try to dispel some of the really bad myths that are out there about it and some of the really bad information that you're all reading about it, and try to help clarify a lot of that. And then we'll talk about the entities if you want. We'll get into that.
Well,
So-
we're so excited to dive in deeply into this mushroom, as there isn't much information out there, and you are an expert and always a lifelong learner and teacher and guide of the sacred mushroom. So just looking forward
I'm
to
looking forward to it too. I can't believe I get to do this.
Let's take some questions. We have a lot of questions. Thank you everyone for putting your questions in the chat. So let's start it off with from Jacob. Jacob asked, has the mushroom totally set you free of fear, anxiety, sorrow, shame, guilt, confusion, loneliness, attachments, addiction, envy, greed, competition, ambition, jealousy, vanity, hatred, violence, bias, and prejudice in daily life once and for all, now and forever?
I haven't, some of those things that you listed haven't really ever been issues with me. My biggest issues have been, because of my autism, have been just a lot of gaslighting and abuse. So when you're just constantly living in a state of panic and anxiety and feeling broken, a lot of those things you listed are luxuries that you get to engage in when you're even sort of at a point where you can think. And because I have always lived in a position of struggling to think through anxiety and panic, and then continually being told how broken and wrong I am, and told that I don't care and that I'm doing this on purpose, and that if I cared, I would work harder and do it. That's all I ever did, was try to fix myself and suck up so that I would stop being abused. So I don't even at this point care about a lot of the things that you listed. As far as like ego based, the negative sides of the ego, like selfishness, when I put that through the filters that I put that through, if I feel like I'm being very selfish, I usually can turn that back around to survival. Like on the surface, it looked like I wanted something for me, but really all it was so I could stop either being abused or I could survive. And today, I don't have to live with that anymore. So it's usually echoes of my past. So everything you listed pretty much covers like things that plague humans. So I'm just human. So if I am engaging in any of those, I'm either not aware of it, but I can tell you I'm always scathing with myself, because that's how I've been treated my whole life, is to do nothing but look at how I'm broken and fix it. So it doesn't make me perfect or good. It makes me traumatized to a point where it's kind of hard to lead a normal life. But there was one thing, can you read the list again?
Fear, anxiety, sorrow, shame, guilt, confusion, loneliness, attachments, addiction, envy, greed, competition, ambition, jealousy, vanity, hatred, violence, bias, and prejudice.
So a lot of that competition and jealousy, I've never felt. I don't care about that. The loneliness, I used to be lonely all the time, but now I'm never lonely because I just want to be alone most of the time. And I'm finally fine with my aloneness. And I learned that loneliness was because I didn't have a me, and the mushroom gave me my key. And so now I have me. So there's lots of people here. Even when I'm alone, there's a lot of them here. The psilocybin that I did 8.5 grams of psilocybin. And that did a lot for my shame and guilt. And that was pretty rough. And so for 6 months, I've been dealing with that. But I recently did soma, which is this mushroom, completely decarbed, and tripped on it. And that was the end of the suffering of what started with the psilocybin back in October. So it set me free. I'm still newly free, so I don't know how much shame is still left in there. I don't do guilt. I've never done guilt. I don't understand guilt. I have regret, but I don't understand guilt. Okay, I think I answered it.
It sounds like you've definitely gone through an evolution of your consciousness and healing with this medicine.
I think it should be daily, and I don't think anyone should ever say, I've healed this. And I also don't think people should say, I'm plagued by this. That's the other thing. This mushroom is the time distortion mushroom, and it forces you to live in the now. And the more you do it, the more in the now you live. And so blanket statements don't make sense to me anymore because they cover the past and the future. So as I sit right here, right now, that's the answer to my question. But tomorrow, who knows?
Well, I think being here now is what so many of us strive to be in this present moment. Another question, can you speak to maybe a few of the commonly asked questions that you get on your channel and maybe like debunking some of the commonly asked questions that you get?
It's not deadly. There's no deaths on record. There's one from over 100 years ago when the physician who signed the death certificate even said he really doesn't think it was this mushroom, that it was the large amount of alcohol that did it. And now we know when you mix alcohol with this mushroom, that the few deaths on record, and few, very few, there was such a large amount of alcohol with a large amount of this mushroom that they believe the combination did it. But I mean, it would be the same as if you overdosed on benzos and drank. So that's not cool. It's really, I don't understand why they frame this mushroom by calling it toxic. That's the first thing they associate with it. And that is what I see proliferating everywhere. The toxic Amanita, the toxic fly agaric. But ayahuasca, you throw ayahuasca up, but they don't say, I'm going to go do a sacred ceremony with the toxic ayahuasca. And there are many mushrooms that a lot of people are sensitive to, and they get gastric reactions, but they don't call it the toxic maitake. And chicken, if it's undercooked, can give you food poisoning. And it can kill you if you get a bad enough case, but we don't call it the toxic chicken. We just call it chicken. And it really isn't, the toxin is in the dose. And I can use it raw, and I dose it very carefully, and it has its place. And then you can work with it and cook it to slowly convert the toxin to the other side of the active of it. And I've taken it completely unconverted, and at every point along the way. And every point along the way has a different purpose. So I don't know, it didn't kill me, and it wasn't toxic, and I don't have toxic reactions by taking a bite of it or two. And there are other people that take more than that. And it's not toxic in those doses. There is a toxic dose, but it's still not going to kill you, but it might make you throw up. But then that goes for so many things. I mean, cough syrup will freaking kill you, but we don't call it, I'm going to the drugstore to get the toxic cough syrup. Like, I don't understand the whole thing about the toxic. I don't understand why we have to preface it. It hurts my heart because this is the most glorious natural medicine. And it should have halos around it and shining things around it. And we should call it the glorious, beautiful Amanita Muscaria. And it just hurts my heart that it's being treated the way that it is. The cooking it, a lot of people say when you dry it, you completely get rid of the ibotenic acid, which is the toxic side of it. That's a lie. That's just not even true. I don't know where that came from. That's just not the case. So please don't think that just because yours is dried, that now you can just eat it or use it. Those are the three biggies. Those are the three. Yeah, those are three biggies. Big myths, I think, about it.
And when it comes to, thank you, Dreamer. And when it comes to healing anxiety, did you find that the larger doses were more effective for your journey, or did you find more impact from microdosing it?
I think that you need both. I believe, and I talk about this, everybody should microdose first and then give it about 10 days before you large dose. But I have found if I go long enough without taking a large dose of it, I start to get weird, off kilter. I start sticking to things in my head, old voices, old beliefs, old attachments. Those old things start to ruminate. I can't just walk in the woods and feel better. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's been 3 months. And then I'll do a large dose again. And I forget how amazing it is and how resetting it is. But then we see that a lot also with psilocybin. So I don't think that's anything that people listening haven't already understood or heard. I don't think it's an either or thing. I think that it's like a lock and key, the two sides of that, the micro and the macro, and then the large doses. I think they all need to work together. That's what I think.
Absolutely. And what are some of the common uses? You've spoken so much to how it helped you and your healing process, especially with anxiety. And what are some other reasons why people are working with this mushroom?
Mostly because they want to trip and they want to experience it because they're either too afraid to deal with something illegal or they've done everything else and they just want to say they did it. But then once they do it, they realize, oh, wow, okay, I took it for a whole different reason and I didn't know. Some people want to be able to brag that they did it and tell everyone it's deadly and toxic, but they survived. So that's not cool. Those are the only two reasons that I hear people talk about because they don't understand yet. The world doesn't understand yet all of the things it can do. So it can work with depression because a lot of depression is coming from or has created that lack of key, that lack of sense of self. And I've seen it just work miracles for people that were depressed. And sometimes people are living with a constant state of anxiety and don't know it. And we talked about that, about all of the sources of hidden anxiety, and that can wear you down to a point of depression and exhaustion. And so people that have undiagnosed or they can't find the source of their depression, I am not a doctor, and this is my completely uneducated opinion, but I believe that 90% of the people on this planet are living with debilitating anxiety and don't know it to the point of exhaustion and depression, and they're getting treated for depression, not the anxiety that's fueling it. So they don't know they're taking it for the depression, but I think that they wind up taking it for the depression. But I do want to say there are some people that don't get anything out of it. And the only thing that I've been able to put together almost 100%, the people who don't get much from it are weed users. So they've been on cannabis for a while, or they're heavy dosing cannabis, or they're daily users, or even 2 or 3 times a week. But but they can go off of cannabis and their endocannabinoid systems can shift so that they can use it, but it takes a while depending on your use. So it can take up to a month. So if you're wanting to microdose this, if cannabis isn't fixing what you need it to fix and you want to give this thing a try, you're looking at least a month. So if it's something you want to do, just plan accordingly. But don't give up on it. I mean, a lot of people get mad at me and call me a scammer and a sham and a liar because they're heavy weed users and then they take high doses and they don't get anything except a few negative side effects. And then they think it's a, garbage mushroom. And I try to tell them, no, wait, please give it a chance. But yeah, that's a thing. And that's the only thing that I can figure out right now about the people that don't get much out of it. But at least I've been able to figure that much out. So,
do you know if there's any contraindications with any medication?
Alcohol, and obviously if you're on anything that's that works on the GABA system. Anything that's a GABA agonist, absolutely do not. Now, if you're trying to get off benzos and you want to use this mushroom, that is something I absolutely cannot speak to, because that is definitely practicing medicine without a license. So I cannot give any information about how I would have come off benzos and used this mushroom to do it. But I made a forum a long time ago, right when I first started doing this, so that people could sort of crowdsource that and work together. So the link to that is in my link tree, if we can leave it somewhere. But the link to the forum, it's in my link tree. And we're going to have a place on that forum for the workshop that we're doing, this upcoming workshop. So y'all can gather there and talk anytime that you'd like when we're not in session. So we'll have that too.
Do you know of any clinical trials that are going on with this?
Yeah, there's a new corporation, Psyched Wellness, and they want to, because right now the FDA classifies this as not for human consumption, but other than that, it's completely unregulated. So you can buy it, sell it, trade it, whatever, and use it. It's completely legal. It's not legal in Great Britain and Australia, and it's not legal in Louisiana. But other than that, it's legal. So the only restriction, like I make products with it and sell them on Etsy to try to pay my bills, for the website, because YouTube censors this mushroom heavily and they've deplatformed everything about this mushroom. So I had to build my own website. So I've had to move all of my stuff over there, and to pay for it, I lovingly prepare. It's very deep about this, that I work very diligently and with the mushroom and with my heart to make these and put them in the universe. So it's not enough for you to trip on or anything, but they're just smoke blends that are not for human consumption. They're incense, and depending on your incense burner, I know what mine looks like, and it's glass. And so I use that every night, instead of drinking a beer or whatever. And so there's like this smoke blend that I make. And then there's oil extractions, and I make those for pain and stuff like that. And so I can do that, and I don't have to label it anyway at all. I don't have to do anything. There are no regulations about it, except I have to say not for human consumption. So what Psyched Wellness is trying to do is they're doing clinical trials right now to prove that it is safe for human consumption. And then they will take that information to the FDA, probably in the winter of 2022. And they're hoping to then get that designation as safe for human consumption. But we don't know if it will only be the muscimol side. So if they say muscimol is safe for human consumption, then that won't apply to this mushroom in its raw form, because in its raw form, it's ibotenic acid. So all of that remains to be seen, but that's the first clinical trial. Then the second clinical trial will be to be able to make medical claims about it when they do sell the product. And if they can, I can. Whatever medical claims they can make, I can make. Anybody can make on labeling or whatever. So we'll see.
We'll see where the research leads.
Yeah, I'm hopeful.
And there's a lot of talk and questions around it being a neurotoxin. Can you speak to, some people are wondering, can it become addictive? Can the ibotenic acid cause brain damage, even if it's taken daily when boiled as a tea?
So here's the problem with the ibotenic acid studies, and it's gross. So trigger warning ahead of time. I'm going to say some things about animals that might be hard to hear. So the original studies were looking for a food enhancer back in the 60s. And indigenous people use this mushroom as a food enhancer. They sprinkle it on food, and it's like a flavor enhancer. That's the ibotenic acid side. And they were doing studies with ibotenic acid for the food companies to do flavor enhancing things with it. And so to start their studies off to see how safe it was, they started out by injecting it into brains of rats. And they saw that it caused lesions on their brains. And at the same time, they were looking at MSG, and MSG didn't in the same way at the same dosage And that's all I'm going to say about that. And for other reasons that you can research, they decided to go with MSG, and they abandoned all work on ibotenic acid. And from that day forward, that is all that anybody repeats and says and talks about, is the neurotoxicity. And they forget that it was by being injected directly into brains in very large amounts. So we don't allow the crossover of that kind of information into oral ingestion and make a claim about it. That would be bad science. We don't do that. And yet it's done with ibotenic acid. And so there was another study done in the late 90s where they injected it into the bodies of rats, and they found no neurotoxicity. So I assert that once you take it orally, it does go through a lot of digestion and conversion in the gut. We know that a lot of conversion happens in the gut, and it has something to do with working with our gut biome and our gut bacteria. We don't understand it yet. And I believe it renders it harmless in the body. I don't know the dosages of that. I can tell you I've been using it for 2 years. That is merely anecdotal. I can tell you that humans have been using it for thousands of years regularly in different types of microdosing protocols, but they always end because it is an adaptogen, which means over time you need less and less, which the opposite is true of most pharmaceuticals and things used to treat panic and anxiety. You need more over time, you adapt to it. But with this, it is an adaptogenic drug where it balances, and then over time you need less of it till you don't need it. So there's my microdosing protocol, and there's one other one that I've seen circulating that comes from an indigenous group of people. But they both require that it end. And you will find if you try to microdose it, you can't continue to take it. Your body will tell you take less. You'll feel it. So there aren't any oral ingestion studies at all. So I can't make any claims about it because there's just no science to claim or to quote.
In terms of the neurotoxicity, do you know if that occurs in larger doses?
The only neurotoxicity that was found was when it was injected into brains in high doses. That's it. But it wasn't there when they were injecting it in high doses into the body. So there have been no oral ingestion studies.
Got it. Thank you. And in our 3-week course, we think that safety is the most important thing for starters. So we're going to Amanita Dreamer is going to be going in depth about how to prepare it, how to take it safely, and a lot of the different the microdosing protocol that she'll take us through. And we're actually going to have a follow-up course after this introductory course that's going to be a deep dive into microdosing, and she'll guide people through an 8-week process on how to microdose and work with it and integrate it while microdosing.
I'm looking forward to that too. The questions are popping up here, but then they're disappearing quickly, so I haven't been able to.
No problem. We have we're recording them on the back end. So can you discuss briefly around the active chemicals?
So ibotenic acid and muscimol. There's also muscarine and muscazone, and some of the misinformation I see out there is people are saying this is old information. I'm seeing it be corrected more and more now, but people complain that muscarine and muscazone are what's responsible for some of the negative sides of the mushroom. And Paul Stamets when he talked to Joe Rogan, man, he did a lot of damage to this mushroom, but he was going on the research from the 70s and what he knew back then. In what he said, he took it wrong. He took too much, and he quoted the wrong thing about it. And so it wasn't what he was feeling was the ibotenic acid. He just didn't decarb it. If he had decarbed it, he wouldn't have felt all that. But you can have these spikes of muscarine and muscazone in a mushroom, and those aren't so fun. I think they're fun, but a lot of people don't like it. But it will make you get in thought loops. And I actually got on one when I high dosed Amanita on camera one time. And I got in a thought loop and I couldn't stop saying oatmeal. I thought it was fun, and I thought it was funny. And I've had it where I drop things, or I walk through a door and walk right back through it. You know, you get stuck in these loops. I don't know. And then you can get the dropsies, and I get that a lot. I think it's funny. I don't know. Some people don't like it. The European Amanitas go through photoconversion through the sun, and they will turn ibotenic acid into muscazone. But the ones on the North American continent do not do that. So when you hear people talking about sun drying, or you're looking at studies that talk about the loss of active ingredients like muscimol, that's because in the sun, it will convert to muscazone, not muscimol. So there's that.
So grateful for all of your information and wisdom around the sacred mushroom. We have a question on can you briefly compare Amanita to golden teacher mushrooms or psilocybin containing mushrooms? What the common.
Yeah. So first, tripping is not just what you hear and see. And I didn't know that until this mushroom. But there's a whole other way to trip. There are so many more senses than we're aware of, like your sense of where you are in time and space, your sense of where you are on the planet, your sense of when you are, and your sense of how you are, and your sense of who you are. And those are the things that Amanita messes with. So it's not so much that you'll get visuals and auditory things, although I get auditory when I meet the entities, but it's not like the universal hum that you get with psilocybin and all the bright visuals that you can get with psilocybin. And when you leave, when you go away, when you do high doses of psilocybin, like I go to outside of our construct, you know, to where the central rotating thing is, and you can see the whole universal construct and all that. But with Amanita, where you go is very dark. And because this mushroom works on your inner sense of self and not your connectedness to other people. Psilocybin themselves to auditory and verbal and sight. But when you're dealing in the self, you don't need those senses. And so what she highlights are things very deep inside you that you don't need light and sound to visit. And so you become aware of parts of yourself when you trip. You go places you don't know exist. It scares a lot of people. It doesn't scare me. I trust the mushroom, but I think that's why people find it terrifying, because they go deep inside themselves. But because of that, I believe it's a deeply, profoundly healing mushroom. But I made a trip simulation video. It's not on YouTube anymore. It's on my website because they deplatformed it. But it does mess with time and reality. Like every time I take it, I see multiple realities layered. Like I can see my current reality that I'm living, and then I see an alternate one that I'm possibly living. And then another one beside that I could possibly be living concurrently, and I will see them I leave my body and look at myself. That freaks people out. So that's the thing.
So you know your video sometimes is going out, and so just so you know, your video and audio are going out. Amanita Dreamer.
Yeah, I'm getting a notice on my screen just now.
Thank
It
you.
was kind of cool. It happened right while you were saying about different realities connecting, though, so it kind of worked.
Y'all
Yeah,
don't even know.
bit trippy.
There's things I talk about with this mushroom, and when I do, they're like bloop. They're laughing. I have the mushroom voice in me all the time now. Like I'm that crazy person, but I'm fine with it.
I just have a follow-up question that came in while you were speaking about the terrifying experience that can occur. Do you think that someone could potentially get worse from the trauma from that, or would it be more of like a deep transformative learning?
I know two people, and I get told a lot of stories. I mean, all over the forum, in real life, people wanting to tell me and share with me too. Out of the thousands of uses that I've heard about, I know 2 people who felt like it put them in a worse place because they were highly, highly, highly sensitive to ibotenic acid, because they had had this opposite response to their benzodiazepines where it was causing them to have panic, and it had damaged their GABA system so greatly that the ibotenic acid caused them harm. And that is the only person I've heard of that happened to. So I don't think that's a normal response to the mushroom. And the other person I know didn't listen to any of my warnings, didn't decarb it enough, took twice of the highest dose I've ever heard of anyone taking, and had a terrifying experience with it because he probably took 20 times the highest dose I would be okay with anyone I cared about taking. So I don't know why he didn't wind up in a coma, but he lived through it, and he was like, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And now he just hates the mushroom. So.
Well, I'm glad he ended up being safe, and I can understand why that would lead.
If you knew him, though, he's a cowboy and he does things like that regularly. So.
In terms of the high dose, how long does that session typically last?
Mine are like, well, okay, 4 hours for the intense part of it, but it's very common with this mushroom that once you start, then you reach a point where you can't keep your eyes open anymore, and it forces you to do something that you think was sleep, but in retrospect wasn't. It was an altered state of consciousness, and that lasts for 2 hours consistently across the board. Most people say 2 hours. Then a different thing happens to different people after that 2 hours. I've woken up paralyzed and unable to move. And so I just laid there and laughed in my head and had fun in my head. That didn't scare me. That scares some people. Some people wake up and they get up and dance. I've definitely done that. Some people get up and they suddenly have all of these answers to questions and problems. So they start working, but you're still under the influence of the mushroom. And then everybody eventually winds up passing out again and then sleeping really deeply for about 6 hours. And then when you wake up, you would say that trip is over, but still you can feel the influence of it for a couple of days.
So it typically has an afterglow effect.
Yeah.
When you speak about decarbing, how long do you decarb for? And do you need to decarb if you smoke it? Someone said that they do decarbing for 50 degrees Celsius for circa about an hour. Is that good?
There's a lot of ways to decarb. I can talk for a very long time about decarbing it. We get into that in the workshop. So I really don't want to, because there's so many different answers. I don't know how to answer that right now. You don't have to decarb it to smoke it. I smoke it dry in a pipe. But if you're going to smoke it, definitely use like a water bomb, because it can burn your throat. It can burn hot. I need to get a dry herb vape. That's the best way to smoke, is with a dry herb vape.
Thank you. There's a sweet question that came in. Is there an effective way that doesn't involve reindeer to consume it for medical purposes without having digestive issues? And I know we're going to go over that a lot in the course.
Yeah, that's just decarbing it. Yeah, there is. We'll cover all that. I know what they're saying about the reindeer. Not a fan.
Can you speak to that?
Nope.
Okay.
Talk about that here. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. They don't. They can go look it up, and then they'll go, "Oh, okay."
Someone, Dr. Sandra, was curious. Have you read the anthology Fly Allergic, and do you resonate with any of the information from the authors?
Is it showing up? It's tattered and it has so many bookmarks in it, and it's written all in. Kevin's a friend of mine. The author's a friend of mine. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it.
Thank you, Dreamer. And just speaking, you spoke earlier about why it's not for heavy pot users. Can you talk about maybe why that is?
I've just been able to piece that together, but I have no idea why. I wish we could get some research going on it, though. It's fascinating. Like, does Amanita affect the endocannabinoid system too? Because we know that it bumps dopamine, it affects acetylcholine, it affects the entire GABAergic system. Like, does it plug into the endocannabinoid system too?
I think that would be such interesting research.
I'm curious, just as a follow-up, because a few people had questions, like, is it like an absolute no-go for cannabis users, or is it like it's less?
No, I mean, try it, but
yeah,
you're probably just going to be disappointed and, you know, waste your time and money and effort and energy, but it's not going to hurt anything. I haven't heard anybody having any issues, like anything negative, just the disappointment.
I love this question from Max. Do you know if, like, do you feel any suspicions as to whether the demonization of the Amanita Muscaria is rooted in malicious intent?
I mean, when you look at anything like that, there's only two answers: power or money. And in this instance, it's probably money. I mean, they deplatformed all the mushroom people, the illegal ones and the legal ones, and some of the medicinal ones. Like, some people that are talking about chaga and lion's mane are starting to get deplatformed. So it wouldn't surprise me if it had something to do with corporate interests. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but that's what I suspect.
And we've gotten intensely censored for promoting this course on our pages, and we're really feeling into that censorship. So if any of you are able to support us by sharing this event with your friends, if this is of interest of you, we'd really appreciate the support, because we're even getting blocked from like tagging Dreamer or mentioning anything in the comments around this specific, like on Instagram and different locations, and it's been really challenging. So
it's been really difficult for me too, because everywhere I go, I just get shut down and told to shut up. And it's frustrating to know so many people are hurting, which is why I built my website. At least where I am, they can't shut me up. And at least your website, they can't shut you up. But all of you that are here, it's almost like miraculous that we were able to even reach you. But it was shocking to look at the numbers of likes and comments on your posts on Instagram. And then the minute you start posting about this workshop, it dropped sharply. Suddenly they were shadow banning you. You couldn't, we were working together, like, try this tag, try that, you know, different workarounds. And now I'm coming in the comment section and I can tag things, but you can't tag things. And it's just been very interesting. So yeah, if y'all could just share any of those posts on my Instagram or their Instagram, if you know people that are struggling or suffering with panic and anxiety. Yeah. And because y'all can register and still see this later, this video later. But share those posts and help us like get around all this censorship. It's so frustrating.
it is. This is the strongest we've ever been censored for anything that we've done. So it's been really,
welcome to my world.
I know, I remember,
everywhere I go.
I remember when we connected at first about planning this together, and now I'm just really feeling into, you know, how you're feeling that censorship on so many of the platforms, and how you've really been a channel for this medicine. So also check out Dreamer's website. Emily, if you could plug that in the chat. It's
Amanita Dreamer, amanitadreamer.net.
Let's take a few more questions. In terms of we're going to talk a lot about microdosing and protocols in the course that we're doing. And when you do journeys, what kind of doses do you do?
Well, I hate to talk about dosage because people will be like, oh, cool, that's what I'll do. This mushroom is so highly personal that what you take and what I take could be as far apart as 10 times the difference between us. And you would get the same experience I would get. I know someone that takes 20 times my dose. to get the same experience that I get. And then what I can use is going to change from one batch to the next because they vary so much in potency. And then it's going to change in the same batch with me from 1 week to the next. So when you talk about dosing, number one, you can't talk about it in grams because that means you're taking it dry and you're not decarbing. And it means you're not mixing them together to make the tea so that you avoid a hot dose. So when we talk about dosing, it needs to be in liquid form, volume, not weight. And so it needs to be in mils or teaspoons or tablespoons or quarter cups and that kind of thing. So it's always with the way that I tell you to make it on my website with the 15 grams turn into a tea that's 1 cup, and then start titrating your dose up. So my microdose is anywhere from 1/4 teaspoon when I'm doing really great or it's an unusually strong batch. I've taken as much as a tablespoon and gotten the same microdose experience. So that's my range. And I have to start over every time I make a new batch for that. I've had a large dose experience on 2 tablespoons. I've had a large dose experience, not been able to large dose on 2 tablespoons and took 6 tablespoons to get large dose. I've smoked a lot of it. I've smoked the same amount 2 separate times, and one time I took off and met the elders, and another time got absolutely nothing. So again, like dosing is so hard. It's just not uniform like it is with psilocybin. I think that's part of the problem with it. It's got a bad reputation because people get nothing because they didn't take enough, or they try to take what they heard someone else took and they get too much. So you just have to try for yourself and titrate up, see what's going to work for you.
Exactly. It's not a one size fits all approach. And I'd love to start to seal our conversation with, if someone was, new to this mushroom and specifically wanting to embark on their journey with it, what was the first thing you would tell them to set that intention out for their journey, or what to expect?
Amanita, the one thing I hear the most about it is she will call out to you. And when she does, you'll dream about it and you'll start seeing it everywhere. And you'll know when the time is right. She makes it very clear. I rarely hear of someone saying, I need to figure out how to do this, and then I need to set the intention and then set a date on the calendar. It's usually the other way around, that they say, I'm glad I found you because she found me. And I think that this is something I'm going to have to do because it's showing up in my dreams and everywhere. And so help. And so I think it's one of those things that I don't think you have to worry, and I don't think you have to work very hard, because the intentions don't matter. What matters most is that you trust the mushroom and let it do with you what it needs to do. And you can merely go in saying, please end my suffering. And you don't need to know what the suffering is. Like when I did psilocybin, I had very specific things I wanted to address and I wrote them down. I've never done that with this mushroom. And psilocybin addressed them very well every time. But this mushroom, because it deals in the deepest parts of you, you probably aren't aware of what it is that you need to be fixing. And it would be wiser to defer to the wisdom of the mushroom, to not limit the mushroom by setting an intention, other than to listen to the mushroom and ask for its healing.
I love that. That just breaks the paradigm of, Western medicine, of listening to the medicine and, building that relationship, how important it is to build that relationship with the medicine. And, we are an active participant in the process as much as the medicine is.
Definitely. Yeah, totally.
So we're so excited to embark on this 3-week journey with you coming up July 12th. And thank you everyone so much for joining us today for this conversation with Dreamer, with being in community with us. And we're just inviting you all to dive deeper with us into our 3-week experience of this introductory course with Dreamer, where she's going to go in depth into so many of these topics. And our intention is for our community to learn how to work with this mushroom safely, and so that we can, start to develop a relationship with it and know how to work with it and use it in a safe container. And we're going to also have, so we're going to have 3 live classes, as she mentioned, on Mondays, and those will all be recorded and sent out to all participants. And then we'll have integration ceremonies, which we're calling community, where we're inviting people to bring their most sacred tea. And Dreamer will facilitate a tea ceremony online, and we'll get to really understand how to work with it in a ceremonial setting and be with each other in ceremony, and process all the material in the course. We want to learn about you, what you're going through in your life, and if you have started to work with this mushroom, or if you are interested in working with it, how it's going for you. And if you're new to working with it or still intending on working with it, we'd love to be in that process with you and learn what your intentions are and just learn about what you're going through in your life.
Do we have the poll results?
We do. So we took a poll. Why are you interested in Amanita Muscaria mushroom? And 50% of people said they're interested in healing anxiety and panic. 60% said they're interested in deepening their relationship to themselves. 51% are interested in exploring large journeys, and 42% are interested in microdosing.
It's about what I expected, and that's cool.
Excellent. So you can find us on psychedelicsocietysf.org, and that's where the event is. The event is also on Eventbrite. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Dreamer, thank you for who you are, all that you've been through. Thank you for your facilitation on this journey with us. And please share this event with your friends, invite your friends to this. We can't wait to be in community with you. And we also offer many other offerings with the Psychedelic Society. We have many other free and by donation groups where we'd love to be in community with you. So just sending you all a lot of gratitude and love, and yeah, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.